Hello. Before this video begins, I would like to warn you viewers that the Blood and Gore DLC was active in this video, so it may get a bit graphic and brutal. So viewer discretion is advised because it may not be for everyone. I would also like to say that a mod was used during the making of this video. The mod is purely graphical and has no effect on the unit's performance. I just have a personal preference for the Greek helmets, the Corinthian Greek helmets, over the ones in the normal Rome 2 game, so I just used that mod as a personal preference for graphical effect, so it shouldn't intervene or change the outcome of any battles. Now that that's out of the way, we can begin. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Rome 2 Unfortified Town Defense Battle walkthrough. In today's episode, we are going over Carthage. Now, in my previous episodes in this series, I said I won't be going every single faction in Rome 2. I'll only be going over the basics and in general because a lot of the factions share similar unit rosters. And I know that we already went over the hoplites, but I thought, you know what? There's a lot of Carthaginian fans, and I think it'd be helpful to teach you a bit on how to use the Carthaginian units to your advantage. But the tactics are pretty similar to what we did in the past. So let's get started. So this is the first battle we are going over. Now in this battle we are facing off against the Seleucids. Now I decided to fight the Seleucids because I thought, okay, when you're playing a campaign as Carthage, you're either going to expand up into Italy, Spain, or into more parts of Africa. And the Seleucids are very close to where you might be invading, next to Egypt and those kinds of areas. So you will likely encounter them if you decide to go to the east, to conquer first. So that's why they are the opponent we are facing off against today. Now, what we have is we have multiple hoplite units. And now this one cavalry unit isn't going to partake in the battle, as we said in the previous video. It is just for the morale, because in the custom battles I don't have this accessibility to having every single unit as the general unit. So normally it'd be the strongest infantry unit we'd have because we wouldn't have cavalry. But cavalry would be very helpful, but unfortunately we can't use it. It's just for the morale booster, which normally would be there. So what I decided to do is try something different. Normally I'd position all of my units here in the center and here on the right side. But this time I decided to try something new. I'm going to position some of my units all the way to the far right, and not just here down this right side. Now this is so when the enemy comes down through this large opening, we can easily flank them on two sides and not be forced to go all the way around all these buildings just to flank. We're already in position. Now this could go easily wrong, because they could also charge down here and stop any assault into their back. But luckily these are quite strong units, so they will be able to hold off and probably defeat the enemy units. I also put in my skirmisher units behind my main force, where I expect some resistance. Now I could have put them here on the right side, but I decided no, I'm going to put them here because we already have a unit on the far right, and just in case they come down the center, we want to be prepared. Now, if you're asking, Alexander the Great, how did you decide to lay out your troops? Normally, I'd try to block off the most valuable entry points. So, when we see the victory point, I'd probably block off here to the left, center, and right to try and stop them from reaching it. But this time, since we're playing against the AI usually charges in or attacks where they were deployed. So when they're deployed here, they're probably going to go down on the right and slightly to the center. So let's get started. Now I could have had my hoplites just in regular formation, but I decided no, I'm going to put them into the hoplite wall formation. Now this makes them a bit more vulnerable because they're in a compact position. They're much easier to kill and surround, if you say killing through missile fire, but it makes them stronger when dealing with a charge. And seeing that their cavalry is the most likely to charge in first, that is what I decide to do to prepare for. Now, I decided to move my units on the right a bit closer. This is because these are skirmisher cavalry. They can stay at a distance and pick off our soldiers. So I wanted to move in and try and deal with this threat as quickly as possible, because as we discussed in the Roman video, they can be a real problem. You could have very strong units, but these little skirmisher units could hit you in the back, surround you, or just pick you off at a distance when you are at a huge disadvantage. So I tried to do everything in my power to quickly take out the enemy skirmisher units, because they are the enemies. They may not be the strongest unit on the tactical display, but on the battlefield they will prove a great challenge, unless they are taken out quickly. So that is why I have my skirmishers focus on taking out the enemy skirmishers first. And when I have cavalry, I usually engage my cavalry first with the enemy cavalry or skirmishers, because they are the highest threat and can do the most damage. While my infantry usually just waits in formation to prepare for the charge, so they are bracing for it and are better prepared. So right now I moved my skirmishers on the far right out of the protection of our hoplites. This is so they have an easier access into the enemy flank without having to worry as much about friendly fire. So as you see, we easily massacred them, not only because we have hoplites, which are extremely good at holding a position, especially with their spears and shields, but also because we had the skirmishers shooting into the back where they were unprotected. Now finally, the Seleucid main force has arrived, and as you see, they're starting to shoot in our flank. Now the purpose of moving the units in the center away is so they don't get shot, but also so we can flank around and fully surround the enemy. By fully surrounding the enemy, we would have a great advantage. And as you see, I also decided to move my skirmishers around. I could leave them here to shoot, but they'll either be friendly fire, or they will be just barely shooting above the heads of our men and not being at maximum efficiency, because they'll not only have to shoot over our men and probably overshoot some of the enemy soldiers, but they'll also have to get stuck with the enemy shields. But the enemy sees that we were trying to flank them, so they send a few units our way on the far right to try and stop us. Unfortunately for them, we expected this and put a very strong unit in the way. So they should be able to hold out. And now normally I would have my units walk into the battlefield or wherever you need them to preserve energy and keep stamina up. But unfortunately, I know that we are greatly outnumbered here and the line will eventually fall, so I am forced to charge in. Now at the last second here, I decided to stop running and walk in. This is so they can have their shields up and be more prepared for the attack that's about to happen. So now we have the enemy fully enclosed. Almost fully. We have them stopped at the right side. We've surrounded them through the back, and now we're trying to break through a unit of their soldiers to charge in on the right flank actually. But what you may have noticed is that there was a switch off. The unit of skirmishers that was standing here and helping went all the way to the back, and the brand new unit that was running around stayed here. The purpose of this is to let these guys regenerate some stamina while these guys continue moving up. So we allow ourselves to continue having movement and weakening the enemy force while preparing our men for the fight that is to come. And now we're starting to break up the enemy force. This is because we fully surrounded them, which terribly decreases their morale. It absolutely devastates them. But also because we have these skirmishers which are easily hitting the enemy in the back, which inflicts a lot of damage. Because I don't think you'd want to be standing and pushing against a couple of shields and spears, and all of a sudden you're getting spears thrown into your back. I'd run too. Well, no, I wouldn't. I'm Alexander the Great. I'm a great general. I would never flee. But I'm sure my men would be tested at this time. as the enemy is. So with more and more of the enemy forces retreating, I slowly charge in. Now unfortunately, we had a weaker unit here, which means they weren't as good with dealing with these enemy units. So although they can put up a fight and will put up a fight for us, we're not sure how long they can stand. And finally, on the far right, we have broken through the enemy forces and have easy access into the enemy back. Now, I wanted to charge into this big crowd and absolutely destroy it, but I noticed something. I noticed that if I move away to here, I can easily break up this fight on this large path, which would allow my other two units to arrive, but I would also allow my skirmish units easy access into the enemy flank, so they can shoot into the enemy backs without being stopped by our men, making it much more accurate and devastating. Now right now I'm just maneuvering the cavalry so I don't end up engaging the enemy forces. But what I hadn't noticed is that this unit had come back. I thought they were just routing and happened to go through here, so I wanted to try and get out of the way. But unfortunately, they came back and were starting to do damage. Now previously I had also grouped the two units so I know which one is the general unit, and so the cavalry stays close to them. Unfortunately, this was the general's unit, and they were beginning to rout. So when this unit routs, the cavalry routs too. Now luckily, because we had charged in, because we had almost broken through here, we had saved the morale and kept the men up and fighting. Unfortunately, because we left here to go, we left the center to go and fight here on the left side, this allowed the enemy easy access into hitting our men without being stabbed in the back in the meantime, which made it very difficult to hold out. And here, we slowly began to crumble. We only had skirmish units left, and they accidentally ran in to be trapped by the Seleucid forces. So now all that remains is just one hoplite unit and two skirmish units. Now that one hoplite unit is running, but I quite doubt it will come back, and the cavalry is forced to retreat because the general's unit has been wiped out. And unfortunately, our hoplites are being absolutely decimated. They are completely surrounded, and they're losing ground very quickly until they eventually rout completely. Now I'm going to speed this part up, and I might even skip this part, because this is quite a boring part. I decided to show, you know what? You should never give up in a battle. A battle can always turn in the other favor. For example, I really thought we would win this battle at the start because we were in such a good formation, we were flanking them, they were starting to rout, and all of a sudden the battle turned against us. But I decided to keep on fighting because I saw that my two skirmish units still had ammunition and one of my hoplite units had come back. So I decided to keep fighting to show you that if you keep fighting, it might take a little longer, but you can do heavy damage, which will be devastating on a campaign map, terribly hurting the enemy force. So now I'll skip ahead in time to when it gets more interesting, because now all that happens is we shoot a few units, they rout from time to time, they come back, and they keep chasing us all around the map. So it isn't very interesting unless you just want to sit here and watch me maneuver the skirmishers back and forth with no real damage being inflicted. But I'll stay for now because, as you see, the great thing about AI is they will turn their back to you from time to time, which gives you a perfect chance, just like here, to shoot into their back and rout a unit. Now this happened maybe 1 or 2 times after this, so a few units will be routed when we come back, but for the most part we will be quite low on ammunition, if not out of ammunition, and the enemy force will still have great number. So now I'll skip ahead, and we'll see you there. So while you were gone, what happened was I had continued to maneuver my units around, and eventually split up the army. This allowed me to pick off the enemy units much easier without having to be as worried about being flanked. So we had routed 2 of the enemy units by hitting them in the back. One was about here, and another happened over there. So we routed the enemy units, 2 enemy units. So this leaves 3 enemy units left on the battlefield. And now we have split them up, so they're on opposite sides of the map, so they can't help each other, which makes them very easy targets for picking off and killing. So now, the hoplite unit that returned, I've decided to charge them in, because I spent maybe not half an hour. A good 6-7 minutes. No, that's not true. I spent a good amount of time just chasing these units around. It may have just seemed so long because I was playing at a very low game speed to fully process everything that was happening and predict enemy movements. So I guess it wasn't that long. But what had happened was I charged in my hoplites right about now when we are coming back to stop the enemy from moving and chasing my skirmishers so they can unleash some ammo into their back and finally rout this exhausted unit, because at this time my men were getting quite tired, and I knew I can't just continue running around forever, they'll eventually catch up, so I needed to deal with this. So let's see what happens. And the 2 units collide, and this allows our skirmishers easy access into the enemy back without much resistance. But unfortunately, although our men have rested a bit while waiting during the chase around, they are still quite low in number, a bit tired, and their morale is quite low, so we have to hurry up with this so we don't take too many casualties. Luckily the unit begins routing, but I don't want to fully finish chasing it until it fully routes just as it did when it loses the flag, because I wanted to do as much damage as possible. Now I could have continued shooting into the enemy to inflict more damage, but I decided no. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and get back in the center and lure the remaining 2 units back in, because as you see it's a 50-50 fight now. Now unfortunately, that also involves the cavalry unit. With the cavalry unit we would have easily won the battle. We would have easily distracted them with the main force and crushed them in the back, which would have easily won the day. But unfortunately we can't use the cavalry unit, and the game does not know that, which doesn't really show the true odds of this battle. But as we see from what has happened so far, it has truly been a massacre. Both sides have taken heavy casualties, and it is going down to the last few soldiers to see who will finally win. Now I'm going to skip ahead once more, because it does take a bit more time to run all the way back here and into the city, and then finally maneuver the enemy units into the position we want. So I'll skip ahead and then we'll come back then. Alright, and we're back now. So what has happened while you were gone is we have finally maneuvered the enemy all the way around, and we've set up a sort of trap. We're expecting the enemy to go down this way, and we will easily shoot into their flanks with the 1 unit that still has ammunition, and charge in from 2 sides. But unfortunately, this isn't going as planned. I had originally expected the enemy to charge in all the way on the far right here. Unfortunately, they had other plans, and they decided to go down the center way. So this means I had to maneuver my units in a way that I had unpredicted, and was not expecting, which already was a huge downside. But luckily for me, the enemy units were exhausted, while my units, they were quite tired, but not all of them. My skirmishers were the most tired because they had to run the entire time. This unit had to run away from the Seleucids, this unit had to run to the battlefield, while the hoplites were basically there and were allowed to walk. So now I'm going to speed up back into normal time, and the hoplites are about to engage. And they have. Now unfortunately this is quite a futile attempt because, well, we're greatly outnumbered. And although we are better in stamina and energy levels, the enemy is just greater in number and greater in strength. So all that remains is our 2 skirmisher units. Now luckily the enemy was looking away, so we were able to hit them in the side and back. And this would have been perfect if we had not run out of ammo very soon. This is a huge flaw because we've taken almost all of them out. We're this close to victory, and all that stands in our way is a good charge in. And unfortunately, we can't really do that because we have such weak units. And they are also quite tired. I wanted to charge in the enemy and hit them in the back, but I was worried that the second unit over here, which was much greater in number, would come in and assist. They had already formed the hoplite wall formation, which made them a force to be reckoned with. So I was just constantly maneuvering around left and right to try and pry apart the enemy formation, so we had an opportunity to attack. But I saw, you know what, this probably isn't going to happen, so I'm going to take my chance and attack now. And then the epic battle, the last stand of the Carthaginians at this settlement began. They fought hard and on two sides, on the far left and on the far right, to try and secure the town once and for all. But unfortunately, it was quite futile of an attempt because they were greatly outnumbered. And although they were doing everything they could, the enemy was just in a much better place. But all hope is not lost yet, for the enemy unit that we had weakened so far has started to rout, and actually routs fully, which is a huge advantage. We had broken through with heavy casualties, and all that remained was a single unit, and we would achieve victory. So I knew this is my chance to achieve victory. To achieve victory, you always have to take these huge risks that will either win you the day or carry you to your grave. So I decided, you know what, this is going to be one of those risks. I'm going to risk everything because a chance like this will never come up again. The enemy was looking away, which was the perfect time to strike them, when they were the weakest. Now I knew I couldn't just run away and wait for my stamina to regenerate and then attack because they had already greatly killed many of our men. And if they regenerated their stamina, they would be a much greater force. So I decided to fight when the odds were in my favor the most, which was immediately. And so the last stand between 92 shield bearers and 79 mercenary slingers was all that stood between victory and defeat. Now, I really did not know what was going to happen, although it is quite likely we will lose the battle because, well, they're much better well-equipped, trained, and everything, and we are both the same amount tired, so energy and stamina won't really make a difference. All that remained was skill and equipment, and unfortunately the enemy shield bearers were much better prepared for such an encounter, and easily slayed our men. But even though it had all come down to this singular fight at the end, a one-on-one, which if we had a stronger unit and maybe tried a different strategy, flanked with stronger units, we would have held out better. But we'll never know. But all in all, this was a great defense and an honorable fight. The battle is not over yet, but I will speed it up because I think we all know what's going to happen. Heavily armored units versus very lightly armored units. Now, they did hold out for a surprisingly long time. I did not think such a weak unit could hold out for so long. But it shows that it is worth never giving up, to always fight till the bitter end. Because you never know. Maybe if we did something slightly different, we would have won the day. And as you see, it is a costly enemy victory. Just as we would have hoped. We either want a victory, so we continue holding the town, or want a costly enemy victory. Which means the enemy took such heavy casualties and such a beating that it was not worth winning. And as you see, that is true. We had greatly fewer men and much worse equipment. And yet we still held out against all these impossible odds. They had over 600 more men than we did. And yet we still held out and gave them such a beating that their units took heavy casualties. And if we had another army nearby, we could easily wipe them out with no problems. So this is the second battle we are going over today as Carthage. Now in this battle I decided, you know what, we're going to fight the Romans. Because, as Carthage, you're going to fight a lot of enemies. In Africa you'll fight the Egyptians, you'll fight Numidians, you'll fight the Seleucids. In the north you'll fight the Romans and the other tribes, and a lot of problems will occur. But I'm just going over the big enemies you are the most likely to encounter quite quickly, which of course would be the Seleucids in the south and the Romans in the north. I guess Egypt could also be a big threat, but their roster is similar to other units we have already gone over. So let us begin. So once again, I have set up such a formation that I am expecting the most units from. Now this isn't ideal, but it's pretty good. And the great thing is, this time we are more prepared for this battle, because we actually have a cavalry unit. Now, Carthaginians have amazing cavalry units, and most factions do. Cavalry is amazing, especially shock cavalry. And I am about to show you why cavalry is so valuable in any Rome 2 army. I mean, it's good at flanking, it's good at hitting in the back, and it's perfect for hitting the enemy when they're routing, doing heavy damage. So right now I have my strongest hoplite units, where I expect the most resistance. Now although the enemy was positioned here in this forest, and they could have easily gone down here, I expect them to go down the main road, where it's much easier and less damaging on the stamina. And although they could cross through this hilly area here, I do not expect it. So that's why I still put units there, because it is an option for them, but weak units because it is an unlikely choice. So now we are getting ready to hold out. The men are excited and preparing for the fight. I have the javelin men ready to throw into the Roman ranks as they approach. And this is the perfect opportunity. The AI usually charges in with cavalry first, then skirmishers, and then their infantry forces. So it is the perfect opportunity to lay a trap, just as we see here. I mean, this battle goes absolutely, almost perfectly as you would want it to go. The enemy charges in their general, unprotected, right into your flank, right into your army. And although they could just back away, they won't, because it's the AI. And luckily we have a cavalry unit that was waiting outside and can easily charge in and do the final blow. Now the general so far has been quite lucky. Or maybe not. Well then, guess it's his unlucky day, because his cavalry unit now gets completely wiped out. Now, I need to act quickly, because the enemy force is closing in. And like I said in the previous battle, and in the previous videos, you have to take out the enemy skirmishers. They are extremely powerful. Even the strongest army will easily be halted by simple skirmishers and peasants with slings and arrows. So that's why I'm using my cavalry. And although the enemy force is quite close, and this is very risky, we could easily lose the entire unit, you need to take those risks, because these risks are the ones that will win you the battle. You need to risk this entire unit, this extremely strong unit, that it may die, especially when it's this close to the enemy forces, just so you have that chance to wipe out that unit that will make a difference for the enemy force. And luckily the enemy makes another mistake of sending their skirmishers up ahead here, which easily allows us to take them out. So far it seems the enemy is advancing just as we expected. They seem to be going right down the center as we predicted. So it's good. Everything is going to our plan. But now we have a dilemma. Do we charge through our men and disrupt their formation for a little bit to try and flank around? Or do we go straight through the enemy forces, possibly inflicting heavy casualties from both sides? I decided to charge through our own men because these were Vigiles. Now, although they're not the strongest unit, they do have spears, and of course spears are a great counter to cavalry. And I thought I had this opportunity. I decided to move my hoplites all the way to the left side to try and flank around. Now, unfortunately, the AI noticed this and countered my movement with their own units. Luckily for me, it wasn't anything serious. Just a few Hastati units, which they can be a good unit. Unfortunately, against late Libyan hoplites, they are nothing, unless used extremely well. So now we are preparing to hold out against the Roman forces as they run to us. Now, what really surprised me is the AI didn't send in their Principes, which are very heavy melee infantry. They would have easily killed a lot of our men. So it was very surprising to see that they only sent in 2 of those units instead of all 3. But you just gotta take advantage of this. When a player plays, they might make this mistake, or when an AI plays, they might decide, you know what, I have a greater plan in mind and I'm not going to do it yet. And you just have to take advantage of that, no matter how bad it may seem. Oh, maybe they'll use them to flank me secretly while I'm not paying attention. Don't mind that, just use it to your advantage. Their strongest unit is away, so that means you can easily flank around and hit them hard without interference, fearing it from the enemy units. So now the Romans charge in. Now, the hoplites, like I said, they are perfect at holding a position, so they will fight well. In the center here, we have also engaged in combat, and the battle is about to get brutal. What I've also done is I've slowly maneuvered my cavalry all the way around back. Now, I waited until the last possible moment, so I made sure the enemy was engaged with my own troops, so they couldn't maneuver to attack my cavalry while it was charging, which would have stopped the entire charge. So I had the perfect opportunity. Now, unfortunately, I had them run, which made them very tired, but it got us quicker. And sometimes you just have to run instead of walk, because by running you get there faster. And it allows you to react faster and cripple the enemy's army much faster. Now, normally I recommend walking to the battlefield or wherever you need, but in this situation, when your entire town is at stake, if you don't go fast enough, the lines might break and you might fall. You just have to run in. So unfortunately, the charge isn't as powerful as it could be because they were forced to run and are quite tired, but still, it shows how devastating cavalry can be. And right away, the enemy units here begin routing. And that's 1 of the 3 gone. It's about to be 2 of the 3 gone. And that just leaves 1 unit. Now, I wanted to continue pushing my cavalry to fully rout all 3 units because it was wavering. But I know that sometimes you just have to back away because it will be too dangerous. But this time, we ended up getting lucky with few casualties. Only 1 casualty, actually. And wiping out 3 enemy units. And our center line has done quite well. It has started to break through the enemy forces and has routed a good amount of them. But now the enemy units that are reserved on the right side are beginning to charge in. Now, I'm not sure what they were trying to do. I guess they were expecting my cavalry to try and flank around and hit them again. What they didn't know is I wasn't going to take the long route. I was going to take the easy and safe route, because I know that they're unlikely to have units there, and it'll be much faster and easier to reach the enemy forces. Now, if you're thinking, oh, what is taking these 3 hoplite units so long to break through this first cohort unit? Well, actually, what you don't know is there were 2 units here, and the first one was wiped out, and this is the second one that has arrived. So not only did they break through the first one, but they've also encircled almost fully the second unit and are starting to rout them. but I think they need a good push from our cavalry to fully take them along. So our men hold them in position as our cavalry approaches and gets ready to charge. And I wasn't sure if I should charge in my cavalry because, well, the unit was wavering, so it could rout at any second and it'd be more useful to just charge in. But I noticed, oh no, the enemy has Vigilets that are getting ready for my charge in with my cavalry. So I might as well charge in, just take this unit out already since it's been wavering multiple times and has just come back with its morale somehow. So I'm just going to finally finish off once and for all. And as you see, a cavalry charge is extremely devastating. It right away routed that unit. So just from fighting in the center and left side, you see how powerful cavalry can be with minimal casualties. They can make all the difference in saving a lot of your men's lives or just routing the enemy much faster. And all that remains is the right side. Now I wanted to move in my cavalry and hit the enemy in the back, so we could just finish this battle once and for all. But unfortunately, the enemy was sending Vigilets our way to try and counter our movement. So I was forced to send my hoplite units back down the center to try and fight them. Now, I wasn't sure what to do, but I made the right choice. You should always continue pushing forward. Never go backwards, always go forwards. Unless it gives you a huge tactical advantage, always go forward. By going forward, you put more pressure on the enemy, which forces them to move. Now, unless you're in a really good tactical position, like between these buildings, which makes it very hard to flank us, you don't want to move ahead. So if we're between these buildings, we don't want to move ahead past them, so we have their protection on the left and right side. But if we were on an open field, I'd highly recommend constantly moving forward, unless you are greatly outnumbered and know it would just be disastrous. So now I'm trying to maneuver my troops in such a way that we encircle the enemy forces and take them out. Because let's be honest, this one unit of Principes here, although they are a very strong Roman unit, against so many soldiers and they're already taking quite a beating, they won't stand a chance. So all that really remains is these Vigilant units, since those Principes still don't want to move in. But let's be honest, why should they move in? The battle is already lost for them, it seems. Just at the sight and sound of our cavalry, one of the units begins wavering. Unfortunately, it doesn't rout, but that's still all in good time. So now all that remains in the battle to do is to trap these Vigilant units and take out these Principes, since those Principes in the back don't seem to be wanting to engage in combat. So what I'm trying to do with my cavalry is hit them in the back. Now, unfortunately, this was an unsuccessful charge because the enemy had turned around at the last second, and I didn't want to charge in their spear, so I just told my men to get out of there. But the best way to lure the enemy into a trap is to just have your units nearby so that they want to charge in, and move the units in the back that are threatening them the most away so they feel safe, and then just charge them in at the last second. And boom, that routs their Vigilets. And all that remains is that one Principe unit in the back. But since we've routed so many of their men, it's all over. They've all routed. Now this has been quite a costly battle for both sides. We have taken a good amount of casualties, but if we think about it in the overall campaign, this was a very good victory. We have kept most of our men alive, all of our units alive, and we've stopped an enemy from not only securing our town, but also we've destroyed an army of theirs. Almost entirely. So now I'm just going to speed up the time and wait for them to finish chasing them. Now, I wanted to chase the enemy to show you that cavalry is very useful, because not only can it flank around, hit the enemy, and just cause a lot of fear in the enemy soldiers, but it can also, once the battle is won, chase down a lot of the enemy units. And sometimes even when the battle isn't won, when you're just in the midst of fighting, a cavalry unit can be very good when you know defeat is certain, so you might as well just do as much damage as possible. So as you see, this was extremely good, and you can tell cavalry is a good unit, and we used it very well this time, because it got over 729 kills in this single battle. Now, that gave it 2 new ranks, so that's good. It'll make it a more effective fighting force, but also it decimated the enemy force. A few of their units are still alive, but for the most part, I don't think the Romans will be facing us again. So I hope this video was helpful in beating common enemies you might encounter while playing the Carthaginian campaign. I know I didn't go over every single unit in the Carthaginian roster, but I think I went over the units you're most likely and commonly going to be using. So I hope this was helpful, not only beating the Seleucids and Romans that you might encounter, but also I hope you view my other videos so they can help you defeat the other factions you might encounter. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you watching again next time.